Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to jump on the interview with us. I really appreciate it.
Are you kidding me, Ross? This is amazing, man. What an opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'd love to start with a question around your name, because it's such a good name. It does many things. The One Club for Creativity. How did we get there, and what is the story behind that?
Well, it's actually a fascinating story because I was just doing a documentary film this week. We just shot it in New York, parts of it in interviews. And one of the founders was an incredible creative by the name of George Lois. And George Lois and Ed McCabe, two industry giants that are both in the Hall of Fame. Ed McCabe was the head of the Copy Club, and George Lois was this really famous art director. And obviously, when Bill Bernbach put the art director and the writer together in a room to create communication, there were so many award shows. Again, this is a reflection of today's times as well. There were so many award shows that George and Ed, who are these heads of the Art Directors Club and the Copy Club, came together and said, like, you know what? There's too many shows. There should just be one show. And let's form this organization called the One Club. And the award will be this pencil, which was sharpened on both ends. One side indicating the copywriter and the other side being the art director, showing that a good idea and good communication cannot exist without the work between an art director and a writer. So that was in the early 70s. And it all went well for a couple of years. And then the guys at the Art Directors Club decided, you know what, we bring in most of the entries into this award show and we deserve more of the revenue. And so there was this dispute and the Art Directors Club broke away. But George Lois was like, hell no, this organization should exist. This is the right thing to do. And so they kept on going with the one show and the one club. Fast forward, now I've been with the organization for 27 years, but fast forward to 2014, 2015, I started taking a more predominant position. I'd worked my way up. I was then the president of the One Club. And when I became CEO, the first thing I did was I went back to the Art Directors Club and started discussions about acquiring them. We were certainly the stronger of the two organizations. And now I've brought back together in 2017, the Art Directors Club and the One Club. We came and brought those together, and we changed the name to be the One Club for Creativity, which now houses the One Show, which is obviously the second largest award show for advertising, marketing, and new media. And then the ADC Awards, which is the Art Directors Club Awards, that is now 104 years old. It's the longest running award show for commercial art.
I love that it's come full circle, that the original hypothesis has been proved. It just took many years to sort of
exactly
to get there.
And what was so cool is that about 10 years ago, George Lois, when he was still alive, he visited me in Fifth Avenue in our offices, and he brought with him the original prototype, which was this sort of resin-based award with this gold core, and the pencil was sharpened at both sides, and it was a lot bigger than what we have or what we had then. And he said, yeah, this was the original concept and idea that I had, but it cost so much that the organization could not afford to make it. So when the One Show turned 50, I actually set about saying, like, hell no, we are going to make this thing. And the board turned around and actually challenged me, and they said, yeah, but we don't want to lose sight as the medium. It needs to be really crystal. It has to be that sharp-edged, beautiful looking piece. So we managed to finally find a manufacturer to create his vision. But yeah, it costs an absolute fortune.
Isn't it sometimes things are worth paying for. They're worth investing in, because we live in such a time where things are digital and transient and
Throwaway.
fire. They throw away. Sometimes something tangible feels so powerful.
Yeah. Well, we're really proud about it. And actually, when we were shooting the documentary about George on Monday, his son gave me the prototype and said, this belongs at the one club and at the one show. So we're blessed to be given the actual prototype that George had created himself.
That's amazing. So now interesting, when we started our conversation at the beginning of the call, I asked you what it is that you want to talk about. And you've got this long history and you've seen many things and the organization's been around forever, but you really wanted to talk about the boot camps, the creative boot camps, and
Correct.
lifting people up.
Yeah.
Can you talk about why you think that's important and why people should be interested in sort of stepping outside of their world and developing talent in different places?
Yeah, so what's really interesting, and I didn't get it at the time when I was in South Africa, but when I moved to South Africa, the one show was very, very much a US-based show, and it's no longer the case. Right now, 60% of the entries come from around the globe, and 40% come from the US. But when I got there, because of that, I turned around and said, this is nuts. We've got to get South African advertising in as well, because we do great work in South Africa. I came there banishing this big banner of how great advertising and marketing was in South Africa, having lived through the Nando stuff, and there was just so many great things being done in SA. So, when I got there, one of the things we were very passionate about is education. And then I started looking at the makeup, and there was question about the lack of diversity in US agencies. And so I'd been working in China with one club, and we had started an education department in China where we were teaching about 400 young creatives how to get into advertising, because the challenges in China was that there was no formal portfolio school system to actually create young creatives who knew how to do marketing and advertising. So, with that knowledge from 2000 to 2008, I thought, well, let me bring that model, which is a bootcamp model, to the US and try and solve the diversity issue that we had there. And so we do these boot camps where we find an incredible brand who has the same belief that agency communications and marketing is better when it's done with a diverse group of people. And so we did about 80 boot camps around the US, UK, South Africa, and we're still doing the boot camps in South Africa. We had obviously a period where we couldn't do them during COVID, but we did bring them back last year. So, for me, when I have a look at the industry makeup, when I was in South Africa, at that time, probably the country had about 50 million people. And if you went into an agency in those days, 20 years ago, you would hardly find anybody of color in a creative team. So I thought, well, why don't we bring the boot camps to South Africa and try and help change that problem? And obviously, things have changed dramatically in South Africa because there are a lot of creatives that are of color in agencies. But you can imagine the factors that influence a brand and their ability to sell to, let's just say, a specific group of people. If the communication team doesn't look like that consumer, how can they really have true insights into how to market to that consumer? And there are some really great stories, and one goes back to one in South Africa where the little middle seat in the taxis is a hot seat, and there's a great piece of communication that was done, but without the insights of somebody who rode in those minibuses and the taxis in South Africa, that communication could never have happened. So, it is really crucial that if you are going to market effectively a brand's products to a consumer set, that the makeup of the teams reflect that consumer. So that was our sort of eye-opening moment. We have moved on. We still do boot camps, not as many, but we have a big career fair here in the US called We're All Black People. That gets over 1,000 people. And the One Club is a nonprofit, so all the money that we get from the One Show and from the Art Directors Awards, we put back into education, into diversity outreach. And so we have this big career fair where we get, around about 1,000 people coming to it. We help them get jobs, get their portfolios reviewed, get them internships. So it's been really, really successful. And we've now started doing pop-ups in both LA and Atlanta, which is a very, very big, diverse city. That's something I'd love to bring out to South Africa too. But what was fascinating is that during COVID, I had one of my staff, Bob Isherwood, who is the global chief creative officer for Saatchi worldwide. He has since left the industry from a creative standpoint, and he was teaching. I managed to get him to come work for us to help our creative development department grow. And he came to me one day. It was actually just before COVID happened, but he came to me and he said, "Have you seen this post?" And it was a post by a young Black creative called Oriel Davis Lyons. And it said, the reason why the US has very few Black creatives is that to get into an agency, you've got to go to a portfolio school. And in the US, a portfolio school costs you about $40,000 a year. And you have to work full-time, and it's a 2-year program. And diverse young creatives who don't have sort of the means to spend full-time tuition of that amount just can't do it. So we decided then and there that we were going to take our resources from the One Show and from the Art Directors Awards and create a free portfolio school for Black creatives. And we started that, as I say, just as COVID happened. We were able to get sponsors by big brands to help with that. And suddenly, though, we found out that we had made a huge mistake. We had the school that was going to be in New York, and we were getting calls from people on the West Coast saying like, yeah, but I can't start at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time because that means it's 3 o'clock in LA or San Francisco, and I have to work because I have to put food on my table and a roof over my head. So we hustled there, and within a week, we had found a faculty person who could drive the school in LA, and we started up the LA school 1 week later, and we were able to fund that. We have now graduated over 300 Black creatives. They have won in the One Show. They've won in the Art Directors Club Awards. They've won in Cannes. They've done Super Bowl commercials. These creatives are really stellar and are creating incredible work. So I'm actually trying to bring this to South Africa because I really believe that South Africa could benefit from this. And, the proof has been in the pudding. It's not just, just creating mediocrity, but it's creating really great creatives who are of color and can contribute to the industry.
I think it's interesting that, we see the conversation evolving because I think everyone conceptually understands that diversity is important, and there's different government initiatives around the world, and there's different definitions of what diversity even looks like depending on where you are.
100%.
But what we find quite interesting is that it can be a differentiator, because if all your competitors look, sound, and operate in a certain way, and you look, sound, and operate different to them, people are more likely to remember you and identify with you and connect with you. And this diversity of thought, diversity of creativity is such a simple switch to flick, to activate, and then have a competitive advantage. And people are spending millions on SEO, outperforming their competitions, bidding on keywords, and there's a fairly cheap solve or opportunity here.
And to your point, a diverse creative team is a better team, and it actually is a business multiplier for brands. So we've seen those brands who've embraced it and done really well with it are definitely on the upswing and doing much better. Their communication is more effective. So there's without a doubt this is a business multiplier for sure.
Mm. So I'm interested, you talked about that these creatives are winning work and getting these awards. And I'm interested talking to you because you're uniquely placed to answer the question, like, what is good? And I think a lot of people don't know how to judge creativity. They don't know how to judge brands, design, ideas. So they look to these awards to almost like give it a stamp. Like, how do you even go about defining good, and like, what does that process look like from your perspective,
right.
So that people can sort of learn from that?
Yeah. So, to your point, creativity is a very subjective thing. One person can look at something, an idea, and say it's brilliant, and another person can look at it and say, I think it's crap. But I think going back to, and not just playing on this word, but how do you pick and select a really diverse jury? And when I mean diverse, I don't mean just race. It has to be gender balanced. It has to be big and small agencies. It has to be US and global. It can't just be all one side. So, for me, it takes us about 6 months to put the jury together. And we really dive into it. Are the big agencies represented? Are freelancers represented? Are small agencies represented? Is there a big studio or a small studio? Is the jury balanced? And only then can I believe you say that your jury and your board is going to actually be effective in assessing the work and determining what is good and what's bad. And even still, when we have a look through the scores, and I dive into the scores, and you look in the back end of it, and it's fascinating because some work can be polarizing, where you've got all the judges leaning one specific way, or you've got other work which is everybody's okay, we're all in agreement, this is great, and it moves forward and wins best in show or whatever it might be. But it's very subjective. But in order to get to a good result, you need a minimum of 12 jury members. They've got to be diverse. They've got to be gender balanced. And I think you'll get a good result from that. We've seen it, and every now and again there's an outlier, but on the whole, I think that work will be reviewed and assessed fairly.
I guess it's interesting because you put the effort into the selection of the humans and then have faith that they'll do the work effectively, because you've selected them cleverly.
Right. And again, there are some outliers, because depending on a piece of work, is there something that's culturally relevant that the jury will pick up on? And I just think a little tip to anybody who's entering, make sure that you're really spell out any cultural relevance to a particular piece of work that comes from a country that the jury might not understand. And, I've seen this, as I said earlier on, I've seen this where you have a look at a great piece of film that's done around, the cricket World Cup in India or cricket in South Africa or even rugby for that instance. And half the jury doesn't understand cricket or rugby, So be sure to clearly articulate, why this is so special from a particular region.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting conversation because culture is such a powerful thing, and it's interesting to know how powerful things like American culture is one of the most powerful machines on earth. It's influenced everyone.
Right.
The British are fairly good at it too. And then it sort of slides down exponentially after that in terms of global reach. So you can have a conversation about the Super Bowl here in South Africa and people kind of know what it is.
Right.
But then you talk about the cricket, which is actually watched by more people in number.
Yeah.
But it's not culturally as influential as what the US has sort of deliberately built, since the sort of 40s, 50s, 60s.
Exactly. And we see it all the time. I mean, I just remember walking into a jury room and hearing a conversation about a piece of work. And I was like, you fucking guys are just missing the point here. You just don't know how amazing this is in context to where that work came from, because it was actually about a piece from India that was about cricket,
But I think at the same time, coming back to the diversity conversation, I think there's huge opportunity now in being niche. And when I say niche, I use that quite widely, but I'm speaking to whatever, this kind of human with this kind of interest in this kind of locale, and I'm doing it in such a laser-focused way that it can connect so deeply with that individual versus something that's kind of open so as not to upset anyone. It's like more general. You just can't connect on the same way.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that because, about 3 years ago, we acquired the Type Directors Club. And the Type Directors Club is this niche organization that really focuses on these people who just love typography, and it's the same thing, it's whether you're talking about fishing or you're talking about a specific niche thing. But yeah, the type directors community is just incredible, but they are this niche community that are just really laser focused on typography, whether it's in print or television, whatever it might be. But I think in today's market, we are seeing a lot of that where there's just generic stuff. But if you really want to connect with an audience, you can drill down really specifically into that little niche.
And I think that the more specific you are, the better. So one of the people I think about a lot is Miley Cyrus,
right,
and how she started fairly global, fairly palatable to a huge audience. And she's found her place in kind of the modern version of country and Western, folk music. She's sort of found the space and she's going so deep in there. And interestingly, she's pulling people from the outside world sort of into this culture because of how committed she is to it and how well she's doing it and how, she's become this attractor around this thing. And I think companies can do the same thing. They can build around something really unique and special and built on a great insight. It doesn't then mean that it doesn't become more globally appealing or appealing to a wider audience.
Well, hey, I would never have taken you as a Miley Cyrus fan, Ross. But that is a great insight.
No, but she's a masterclass in look at how her styling has evolved. She's basically becoming the generation's Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating that someone would commit to something like that. And then on the other side, you've got a Taylor Swift who remains sort of, she's massive, but she's kind of globally palatable. And then there's the myriad of Taylor Swift, sort of just for each generation, there's another one that just sort of follows on.
Yeah.
And each doing really good work, but not
Very
really unique
narrow.
or really special or narrow.
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree more.
So, and fascinated, you have this opportunity or this place to see all of this work coming in from different places. Do you see differences in how the rest of the world is sort of doing stuff, or is there a global sort of feel that's happening?
No, it has just been a fascinating journey. When I am a designer, I studied at the University of Technikon in Durban, and I had my own agency in South Africa. So, I come from the agency background. I am a creative. When I got to the one show and had a look around, what was really interesting is and this again is going back a long way. It's 25 years ago when we had a look at the place that was lighting it up was Singapore, and they used to win hands down just almost everything in the book, and it was a select few that just did incredibly beautiful print ads, great copywriting, and that was sort of a hotbed at the time. And then you see now, if you have a look at, let's just say, the Philippines. The Philippines have been known for their humor, and when you start looking back, I don't know, 10 years ago, they were great at doing it, and then they suddenly fell off, and then they went away. But the last 4 years, 3-4 years, we've seen this reemergence of the humor in storytelling in the Philippines. It is just fantastic. So you can look around. Brazil was a hotbed when it came to the early days of interactive and banner advertising. The UK is just great at storytelling. When you have a look at their film and what they do around the Christmas season, it's just some of the best stuff you've seen. Obviously, the US as a sports leader and telling stories around Nike and the likes, so it is fascinating to have a look at the global trends and to see what are the differences. For instance, this is, again, looking through time. When you looked at Argentina was the most incredible group of creatives that would do amazing storytelling and film. And then right next door to them was Brazil, and they couldn't punch their way out of a wet paper bag when it came to film. But when it came to print, they would kill anybody in print. So it's just so interesting to see how different regions do better at different things and how it changes through time. It's incredible.
It's a unique spot that you sit in. But when we were having our initial conversation, I asked you, what is the thing that's currently interesting or exciting you? And you were talking about artificial intelligence and how that interests you.
Yeah.
Most of the creatives that I meet are allergic to this as an idea. There's a select few that have kind of leaned in, but most people feel deeply threatened about it.
Yeah.
How do you think about AI?
Well, and I don't want to just be one of these people who are jumping on the AI bandwagon, because I'm really not. It was interesting because about 3 and a half years ago, I was sitting and my phone rang on a Sunday afternoon, and there was this guy, PJ Pereira from Pereira, incredible creative from Brazil who's come to the US and started an agency doing incredibly well. But him and I have been friends forever. He was on our board of directors for a while. And he called me and he said, "Hey, I'm writing a book and I'm wanting to do the cover using AI, because the book story is about this kung fu person in China and AI, weird book story. But anyway, that's what it was about." And we were just on a Sunday afternoon, just spitballing, like, hey, what do we do? And how do we do this? And obviously in those early days, it was Midjourney and stuff like that we're talking about. And then the conversation got to, like, I said, it would be really incredible if we took AI and we used that as a story to talk about the awards. And at that stage, the Art Directors Awards were going to start their 102nd year. And so PJ said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we get 101 designers plus AI? So 101 plus 1 is 102. And we'll do sort of a call for entry campaign around that. And we have an international board of 23 people. And we asked each of the international board to find designers in their country that could join this group. And so we finally selected 101 designers and asked them to work with AI, do their prompts, let us know what the prompts are, record their video about the interaction, then get the output from AI, but they had to work on top of that. They couldn't just put in a prompt and then give us what came back. They had to actually take what they got back from AI and then work on it to have a final result. And they had to document the story. So they did that, and I presented this to the board, and the board said to me, like, I don't know, man, like, AI, whatever. But the board thought I was crazy, and that was, I'd say 3 years ago we started this. So it was way before AI actually became mainstream. What's interesting is those designers are now really up to speed in it because they were the early adopters, and they've been doing some incredible work. And I get notes back from them regularly saying, like, thank you for actually turning me onto this because it's really changed their lives. But I'm just a firm believer, and we're starting this. We have something called the Executive Creative Summit, and that is an invitation-only gathering of agency owners, founders, chief creative officers, anybody in the C-suite. And we asked them to come together to talk about the business of running the business. And one of the beautiful things actually is that somebody who's really, really into AI and knows about it, his title now is Fuck You, Sam. And Sam Altman, who was the founder of OpenAI, he turned around and said that but 94% of all human interaction now can be actually done with AI. And I'm a firm believer that creativity is going to be that last outpost because I just don't believe a machine is going to be able to replicate the ability for a human to create feeling out of communication. I think when you have a look at communication that's done through AI, and there's a lot of it, you can see it very, very quickly and easily. And it's lifeless, it's soulless to me. So I still believe that creatives are going to be that last sort of stance when it comes to the machine. What we can come up with good communication is emotional. It makes you feel something. And I'm yet to see that from AI.
I mean, we've been working at Nicework in emergent technology forever. We started making Flash games, and it was like the birth of interactivity. Then there was interactive DVDs, which was the first time you could kind of, as a user, interact with content and structure your own stuff. And I remember watching an interview with Trent Reznor, and the guy was asking him, he was like, well, this is when tools like Ableton and Pro Tools were just sort of coming out. So you no longer needed a $1 million desk to like produce stuff. You could do it all on a computer.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, so what do you think about this as a electronic music producer? Like, what's going to happen for you? And he said, well, what's going to happen is there's going to be more music, but it doesn't mean it's going to be good music.
Yeah.
Because good music comes from a specific place made by a specific person for a specific reason. And I think that's a little bit what's happening here, is that it's hard to have that little feeling, that little nugget that people build around, that other people can then see and feel and engage with and care about. That's not linear, it's not pattern based, it's something else.
Yeah, so I talk a lot about this, and one of the things I like to talk about is going back to the late 80s, early 90s. Along came a thing called Photoshop. Now, if you were a photographer and you were doing retouching, you either did it in a dark room or you did it, with an airbrush or other tools. And when Photoshop came along, there was this huge big pushback to it. And either you, as a photo retoucher, embraced this new tool, or you just continued doing it in your old ways, and you probably got left behind and were without a job. So for me, AI is just another tool. How do we use it? How do we adapt to it? How do we use its strengths? But it's not going to replace it. At the end of the day, it's just going to be another tool that'll actually maybe help us be more efficient. One of the pieces of work that won last year was for Squarespace, and it was a spot that was done by Martin Scorsese. And I know David Lee, who's the head creative on Squarespace. He actually did a presentation for us on how they used AI in convincing Martin to actually do the job. And he's a very visual person. And what they did is they actually went and used Midjourney and a number of other AI tools to comp up what the final product would look like. And it was so close to the original. But they didn't use that as the final piece. They then went out and shot it. But they used that as the comp to illustrate what the final piece would look like. So, AI is great for doing fast comps to get an idea out there, to make it look somewhat, reference to what you will produce in the end. But I don't think that agencies should just be relying on the end product to come from AI. I mean, it's again, as I say, it's a tool.
I'm going to ask you one more question. At the beginning the beginning of our call, I asked you, what is the one thing you want people to learn and take away? What is that? What do you think people should take away from our interview?
Well, again, and it sort of comes back to this point where I've been in the industry a long, long time, and I'm still probably one of the first people in our organization to bring new things to the fore. So, I was flying from Florida, where I live, back to New York to the office, and I happened to be playing around with ChatGPT, and I built a GPT in about 30 minutes myself, and I just pulled stuff off the web and put this together and showed it to the team, and the team were absolutely blown away. And I was at this large conference, and somebody asked me a question about our award show, and they said to me, it was a production company, and they said, do you have a category for experiential based stuff? And I said, yeah. They said, what categories do you have? And I thought, shit, hold on. So I went to the GPT that I'd created, and I just asked it, and it gave me all the categories. I could not have pulled that out of my head that quickly. It gave me all the categories and everything. So, this is the power of it. But what I'd like people to take away from is, don't be intimidated by it, and don't stop learning. Be inquisitive. Be the first to, if you hear of a new software, or if you hear of a new thing, try it. Go and get an account. Play with it. Does it make sense? Yes. Okay, maybe adopt it. If it doesn't make sense, just throw it away. But if you're not inquisitive, you're going to get left behind. And it's funny that you say that you were programming in Flash and all that type of thing. When I was at Apple Computer, how I got this job, was I was programming and director at the time, and it wasn't Adobe. It was Macromedia at the time, and I was creating stuff in Director. And when I got to meet the CEO of the One Show, and Apple sponsored it, they had this annual, this big, thick book of all the work. And when you went into the annual, the TV commercials had 3 or 6 frames of a commercial in the annual. And I said to her, like that's nuts. And so I actually programmed in Director the first not DVD, but the first CD-ROM, and I programmed this thing and I sent it over to her and I said, this is what you should be putting in the book. This DVD, the CD-ROM of the TV work. And she wrote back to me and she said, "Oh my God, this is incredible. How much do you want for it?" And it was ridiculous because I was like, $1,200. But like, she sent me a check the next day and she said, "Done." But it was, and then that's how I actually ended up getting the job. But you've got to just be inquisitive. It was the same time at Apple. I was fiddling. There was Quark Express was everything in digital publishing. It's like if you didn't know how to do Quark, you were dead. But along came this thing called InDesign, and I was so pissed off with Quark because they were slow. They never updated their product. They didn't give a shit. They had complete monopoly on desktop publishing when it came to magazine, print, and newspaper. And I thought, like, look at this, man. I'm going to learn InDesign. And I started from InDesign like 1 when it started coming out. And I became very proficient in that. So, just be inquisitive. We always talk about creatives need to be inquisitive to do great communication that reflects culture and what's going on around them. It's the same thing with tools, software tools and the likes. Program, learn some coding, learn a new app. Lifelong learning is crucial in order to get ahead and stay ahead.
I think it's such a great thought to end the interview on. Kevin, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the energy and effort you spend stimulating creative conversations around the world and supporting creative people. And thank you for coming on the show.
Well, Ross, thank you for the opportunity. And I really and truly hope that our discussions with some brands in South Africa will afford us to bring one school to South Africa, because I think it'll be a great opportunity to help develop some of the emerging young talent in the region. It's incredible that we can take people who don't have that much opportunity and give them a career that really is a well-paying career that will uplift both families and generations, really.
I'd love to support you in that journey. So I can go on the record and say that at Nice Work will help you.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
Cool. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll catch all of you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.